Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and in this video I want to talk about how to sell candidates on working for you during the recruiting and hiring process. Now, as with anything in business, recruiting and hiring is sales. And if you're missing out on that, then you're missing out on really great candidates. And so I've got my A-player hiring process video. Definitely recommend that you check out that video. That's like the X's and O's of recruiting, of interviewing, of hiring, and all those things. I've got some other advanced recruiting and hiring videos, like check out those. But this is kind of a through line principle, which is you need to treat the hiring process like it's a sales process. And you need to sell the best candidates on working for you, because as your business grows, as you try and start to attract bigger and better talent for maybe higher level positions, a large part of this process, recruiting, a large part of the interview process, the whole thing is sales. And so maybe you remember from the book Who, there's the 4 S's of hiring. So there's creating a job scorecard, there's sourcing the best candidate, there's selecting the best person out of that candidate pool, and then lastly, there's selling them on working for you. There's a reason they include that as the 4th S, because that's a key thing, but really you need to embed that into everything that you do as you recruit and as you hire. Now, there's really 4 main places that sales shows up during the recruiting and hiring process. Number 1 is in the recruiting process, so how you recruit. Number 2 is on the application page. Number 3 is in the small personal touches between applications and between interviews and things like that. And then number 4 is during and after the interview process. And so I'm gonna break each one down in this video. Let's start with recruiting. So when you're selling in the recruiting process, my favorite phrase is, who do you know? Now I've got another video. It's all about the 4 words that you should be using every time you hire for any position. And really this is a great way to get good referrals, but also it's a great way to sell the right candidates on working for you. And the way that it works is super simple. You say, hey, who do you know that is great at blah, 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 or that would be a fit for this position? So the reason this is sales is because it gives you an opportunity to say, there's an amazing company, there's really great benefits, it's a fast growing position, it's a key position at an Inc. 5000 company, is just an example that I use, and I'm looking for a clone of you. Who do you know? Right? So I've just sold that person on putting their name in the hat, and they didn't even know it, because I'm just reaching out, and worst case scenario, they'll send me someone else that's also probably good. Best case scenario, they'll apply. And best case scenario, sometimes they'll apply and send me someone else, right? So that's kind of stealth sales in recruiting. Now, number 2, let's talk about the application page. Your application page, this is really just a sales page. So if you have any marketing pages, any sales pages in your business, you're gonna wanna take from that and maybe even pull in people in the company who work on those things to help you with your application page. I've seen so many horrible application pages. It's a generic description of the role. There's a couple generic other things. There's, hey, this is the type of person we're looking for. There's no mention of comp. There's no anything. Please apply. And then there's this huge application. Who's going to do that? No one's going to do that. They don't know enough about the role. They're not interested in this position, and it's not compelling. Like, why would I come work for your company? So you need to scrap all that and go back to the drawing board and rewrite this page. Now, I'll give you a recommendation. Find one of my hiring pages and just copy that. And I can't tell you how many people that I know, my buddies that have companies, I see my hiring page getting used for so many companies because it's really, really good. And so here are the fundamentals of a great application page. So here's what I like to do. So first and foremost, I put a video at the top. Almost no one does this. So this immediately helps you stand out. And I give a video that's an overview of the application page, but also this is a sales video, right? So I'm telling them about the why behind the company. I'm telling them about the position, why it's so important, why it's going to be meaningful. They're going to be doing meaningful work. I tell them about what we're looking for. I push people away. I say, hey, if you're this, this, or this, do not apply. This is not for you. Right? So I'm super clear on that. And people love that. They're like, oh, this is really interesting, right? So I'm starting with a video. I have a clear description around the mission and purpose of the role. If you've already created a job scorecard, which I have another video all about job scorecards, check that out, you find that. But if you've already done the job scorecard, that is your hiring page, essentially. You've got the mission and purpose, you've got the role competencies, what level of experience do I need you to have? What does the compensation look like? A range? Yes, you should put this. And this is one of those questions people are gonna have, and you're gonna lose out on good candidates. And so I put, usually it's a big range, and it'll say depending on qualifications, experience as well. I also put benefits. Like, we've got a profit share at Self-Publishing School. We've also got bi-weekly house cleaning on the company. We've got amazing healthcare. So if you have good benefits, highlight those benefits. And that's on there as well. I talk about the culture. There's social proof elements. There's, hey, we've been on the Inc. 5000 list. We're one of the best places to work, according to bestplacesToWork.com. Adding all those things and getting people fired up about the company, about the culture, about the position, all those things. Now, I have a little bit of an advantage, which you may or may not have, but this is a big part of the reason why I record a lot of these videos, is if you go to a hiring page that I have, you see all different types of videos. So I have a video of what it's like to work at self-publishing school. I have our core values videos on that page, so many things. So by the time people go through that page, maybe they've been job hunting and looking at a bunch of different application pages. They're like, oh my gosh, this totally looks like a company that I want to work for, right? And so now they're excited not only to fill out the application, but to continue through the process. And remember, this is a sales process. So now that we've got a great application page, we've talked about recruiting, let's talk about the little touch points in between interviews. I'm gonna talk about interviews in just a second, and I'll give you some practical tips and things that you can use there. But I found, and this is something I messed up early on, is the little touch points between application, between interview and all that make a big difference to sell people on the culture, but also to keep them interested in staying in the process. So if you don't have a confirmation email when people apply, you should have that. It's super simple, but most people don't have it. And so you confirm their application, but also that's where I do use that time to do further indoctrination, right? I might say, hey, check out these culture videos, check out these core values videos, check out what it looks like to work at self-publishing school, other things like that that'll get them further engaged. Now, also what I've started doing is I have my assistant call in between for my top candidates. So she'll say, hey, congratulations, you made it to the next round. And just that extra level of personal touch. I used to just send an email, but then, it's a little bit impersonal. They've only maybe had one short conversation with you or one application. So now all of a sudden they are getting interviewed. They just don't know it. Because later I'll ask my assistant, hey, what do you think of all the candidates? Who stood out? Who treated you with respect, who treated you well, who didn't, who was difficult to work with, all those things, finding a time, all that. And so it's another extension of the interview process, but also it's another way to bring personal touch and to sell them on continuing with the process by adding that personal touch. Now, lastly, I want to talk about selling as part of the interview process. And really, I want to zero in on 3 tips that you can use to integrate sales into the interview process. Now, obviously, a lot of your interview is going to be qualifying them. That goes without saying. You can check out my other hiring videos. That is super important, is that I am qualifying them. I am making sure that they are qualified. I'm asking probing questions. I am digging deep. I'm asking polarizing questions. So I might be trying to push them away and saying, hey, do you really want to do this? Why do you want to work here? All those things. So that goes without saying, I'm trying to qualify them, but also you need to leave space and kind of integrate and embed little sales tools or sales mechanisms throughout the interview process. So the first way that you do that is leave space at the end of every interview. All right. I used to not do this so much, but now I'm super intentional about this. I want to leave at least 5 to 15 minutes at the end of every single interview and say, hey, any questions that you have that I can cover or anything that would be helpful for me to cover, I open the floor. And a lot of times those questions are really their concerns about potentially working at your company. So you're almost objection handling, to use a sales term, through the interview process. So, hey, any questions? And they might say, hey, what's your vision for the company? A lot of people ask that. Or they might ask other questions that then allow you in answering the question to actually do selling. And it doesn't feel like selling, but it is selling because you're getting the person excited. And because, remember, it's if we just spent 90% of the conversation talking about them and why they're qualified and all that, well, they probably have a bunch of questions about us and about the company. And I usually don't spend a ton of time talking about that. This is a great way to embed that both not only into the interview process, but also at the end of the interview by leaving space for questions. Number 2, some of your interview questions really should be buying questions. That's what I call them, especially as you get towards the end of the process. So these are questions, but you're really getting the candidate to sell themselves on why they want to work for you, or you're kind of doing a heat check. So one of my favorite questions is, hey, scale of 1 to 10, how interested are you in this position? Right? Why come to this position? I'll really push back on that with people. I'll say, hey, it sounds like you got an awesome gig right now. Why are we talking? Why are you interviewing? Why come work at self-publishing school? And so I'm challenging them and I'm understanding their why, but also they're selling themselves. They're saying, oh, well, here's why, because I really like this. I really like this. So you're doing sales leading up to the end decision, right? Which is you deciding to hire them, but then there's also them deciding to accept the offer if you make an offer. And so we're embedding those buying questions and getting them to convince themselves about why they want to work there throughout the whole interview process. Number 3, and the final piece, and this is super important, is as you get to the end of the process, you need to flesh out objections ahead of time. So if I show up to an offer call, and I've got a whole other template for how to execute an offer call and all that stuff, but if I show up to that offer call and I am surprised by objections and they say, oh yeah, no, I'm not interested, I don't want to take the position, that means I haven't done my due diligence ahead of time, right? So your job as an interviewer is to flesh out all of those objections as soon as possible and throughout the process. So I'll ask, hey, are there any other positions that you're interviewing for? Right? Because I've gotten burned on that where people were interviewing for multiple positions. They got a different offer in the middle of the process. They took another gig and I missed out on that person because I didn't ask that question. Because then I can say, okay, well, before you take that job, if you get an offer, let's talk. So now I'm fleshing out that objection. I'm also talking about current wage, existing wage, right? So what did you make at last positions? What are you making currently? That might be an objection for the offer. And I always want to make sure that I'm coming in higher than what they're at currently. Right? So maybe that's not possible and maybe I need to flesh that out ahead of time and maybe that disqualifies them, but also it's handling that objection ahead of time. Like, what are the benefits that you have right now? Like, I want to make sure this is better, that when you're coming to self-publishing school, that's better. Maybe it's, hey, what does your family think about this? Like, this seems like a big career move. What do other people think about this? So I'm looking for any landmines, kind of probing for landmines, probing for reasons that they might say no. And I kind of flip the switch on this, especially if I know this person's in my top 3, or especially if I know like this is my person, then I'm going to flip the switch probably about 70% of the way through the interview process. And I'm going to really make sure that I'm hammering down any objections. I'm searching for landmines so that I'm not surprised when it comes time to make an offer. All right, now the last thing that I want to cover here is obviously I've spent a lot of time talking about why it's important to sell through the interview process, through the recruiting process, application page, all that stuff. It's important to sell. Do not embellish, okay? So one of the worst things that you can do is overpromise and underdeliver. I like to do exactly the opposite, which I'd rather scare someone away, talking to them about how difficult it's going to be and setting clear expectations and say, I can't handle that, because that probably wouldn't be a long-term fit. I'd rather do that than overpromise and underdeliver. So you don't want to, in the football world, they call this de-recruiting. It's like when you recruit someone and they get there and you're like, okay, now you got to de-recruit them and be like, you actually might not start right away. You actually might not. You're going to have to work really hard for this. This is going to be really tough. We might redshirt you the first year, all those things. You don't want to do that. So don't overpromise and underdeliver. Don't create a situation where now you've got to kind of mitigate that damage in the first 30 days when they're on the roll. Don't do that. Yes, it is important to sell, but it's also important, and I would argue it's more important to shoot people straight throughout the process. So I want to make sure it sounds really hard, and then I want to come in under that so that we have a healthy and a long-term working relationship. All right, so there you have it. There's how to sell throughout the recruiting, the interview, and the hiring process. I hope that you found this helpful. If you're missing out on this, and if you do not do this, you're going to miss out on a whole lot of really great candidates for your company and for the positions that you're filling. So I'd love for you to take 2 minutes right now. Scroll below this video. Let me know what were your main takeaways from this video, or how do you sell during the interview process, during the recruiting process, things like that. Share your tips and takeaways below. Seriously, take 2 minutes right now. I read and respond to every single comment, so scroll below this video, comment right now. As always, click the like button and subscribe to this channel and to the 7 Figure Principles podcast, and I'll see you in the next video. Talk soon.